I recently received an email message from an online acquaintance. It pointed to an article, a classic example of climate change denial, and it began with this paragraph, quote, "A new climate panic is gripping the far-left profiteers of doom. Those few of them who are climate scientists have made fame and fortune by telling us the world is toast unless the once free West, though responsible for only a fifth of the world's sins of emission, commits economic harikiri. The cost of placating climate communism is already in the quadrillions." End quote. I will not reveal further information about this article because I do not want to draw positive attention to it or to its author. I'm neither a climate scientist nor a profiteer of doom. Rather, I'm a conservation biologist who has dabbled in the important topic of climate change for about 4 decades. I've not drawn a paycheck for nearly 13 years, so I'm hardly profiting from anything, much less promulgating the evidence discovered by others. However, I am capable of gathering and collating evidence. As one result, I am frequently and incorrectly accused of being a climate scientist and a profiteer of doom. The lying Michael Mann, for example, has incorrectly claimed that I am paid by fossil fuel interests. As usual, there have been no adverse consequences for people who lie about me. Had my friend and renowned attorney Gerald Maples not slipped on a dock in the Bahamas and subsequently died late last year, I have little doubt some of the liars would already be facing justice in the courtrooms of this country. The email message from the online acquaintance, complete with the conventional distract and divide message from the media, reminded me that many humans love to hate. In addition, we often fall victim to attempts to divide us. We seem evolutionarily habituated to binary thinking, especially the kind that acknowledges us and them. As if us and them is not sufficient to guarantee negative results, we are driven to conclude that we are good and you are bad. Obviously, the notion of binary thinking is flawed. It's not us versus them. Rather, it is, as I've pointed out frequently in this space, we are one. Our beliefs and thoughts about almost everything lie along a spectrum. With respect to climate change, the spectrum ranges from, on one end, climate change is the best thing ever, and it will lead to even better lives for humans. At the other end of the spectrum, the end dominated by critical thinking and therefore existential pain, climate change is leading to loss of habitat for all life on Earth. Why all life on Earth? 2 reasons, and either will suffice. First, the very rapid rate of environmental change in our wake, notably including loss of aerosol masking, will lead to a rise in global average temperature too rapid for organisms to keep up. Supporting evidence is found in a peer-reviewed Nature Communications paper published on June 15, 2021. The paper was written by Jieling Jia and 3 other scholars and is titled "Significant Underestimation of Radiative Forcing by Aerosol Cloud Interactions Derived from Satellite-Based Methods." I commented on the paper with a video in this space on June 23, 2021, titled "Science Update: Aerosol Masking Previously Underestimated on Overheated Earth." A blog post released the same day and with the same title provided links to supporting documents. The aerosol masking effect is finally leaking into reports published by the corporate media. Wired published a story January 13, 2022, titled "The World Was Cooler in 2021 than 2020. That's not good news." The subhead reads, "The global temperature was down thanks to La Niña, but it was still the 6th hottest year on record, and 2 billion people had their warmest year yet." The story points out that, quote, "The last 8 years were the 8 hottest on record," end quote. It goes on to indicate that land temperatures were much warmer than marine temperatures, as I've indicated previously in this space. It also points out that most people live on land, not on the sea, as I've also pointed out previously in this space. The rapid rate of environmental change will be sufficient to cause the extinction of all life on Earth. So, too, will be the uncontrolled meltdown of the world's nuclear facilities. I reported the consequences of such an event, including the extinction of all life on Earth, in a blog post at GuyMcPherson.com and a video on YouTube, both titled "Means of Extinction: Nuclear Facilities Implode." The video and blog post were released on June 29, 2021. The blog post provides links to articles that support the conclusions I reached in the video, as usual. England's Christopher Monckton can be found at the Pollyanna end of the climate change spectrum. A few scientists, including me, can be found at the other end of the spectrum. Each of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of individual grief can be found among individuals along the climate change spectrum, from Monckton's denial to the acceptance experienced by me and others. Anger is common, bargaining is rampant, and depression is restricted to the relatively few people knowledgeable enough to know what's happening and who also feel there is nowhere to turn. In this video, I am yet again pointing out evidence underlying the notion that climate change is leading to loss of habitat for humans, and therefore for all life on Earth. In doing so, I hope to engender acceptance. Yes, you are going to die, while also promoting support for the mere reflection framework. Yes, we are all going to die, but we need not destroy all life on Earth in the process. Self-proclaimed scientists such as the lying Michael Mann, and also self-proclaimed activists inspired by the figureheads at Deep Green Resistance, would have you believe the mass of humanity needs to make changes to keep us from entering the arena of dangerous climate change, even though we're already in the arena of dangerous climate change. The lying Michael Mann has you and I making those changes so that he and others in similar positions can maintain their privilege. These actions include changing what we eat and how we travel. I'm not opposed to these ideas, and I eat quite low on the food chain myself. But they are ironically hilarious coming from a man, the lying Michael Mann, who clearly has not skipped a meal in a while, and who never misses an opportunity to fly via commercial aircraft. The figureheads at Deep Green Resistance want you to dismantle civilization, although they are quick to point out that they are not interested in joining you. Neither Mann nor the figureheads at DGR will make changes in their lives. That task is for you, not them. The fact that we are currently witnessing the deaths of millions of people every year as a result of abrupt, irreversible climate change indicates the changes suggested by Mann are wholly insufficient to the task at hand. On the other hand, the figureheads at DGR, notably Derek Jensen and Lierre Keith, are indicating that you and I need to dismantle civilization. The subsequent loss of aerosol masking ensures the fastest path to extinction of all life on Earth, contrary to the lies told by Jensen and Keith. In short, let us accept the evidence indicating we face an existential threat. Then, let us move ahead with urgency in our personal lives and as a global society. Additional evidence follows. Even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, perhaps the most conservative scientific body in planetary history, concluded the overheated ocean is responsible for the irreversibility of climate change. Specifically, on September 24, 2019, in the IPCC Special Report on the Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, these words appear on page 77. Quote, "Ocean acidification and deoxygenation, ice sheet and glacier mass loss, and permanent frost degradation are expected to be irreversible on timescales relevant to human societies and ecosystems." End quote. The special report cites 5 peer-reviewed papers supporting this particular conclusion. Some 2.5 years after this report was published by the IPCC, on January 11, 2022, a paper in the peer-reviewed journal Advances in Atmospheric Sciences indicated that warming of the ocean continued through 2021. Specifically, quote, "The world ocean in 2021 was the hottest ever recorded by humans, and the 2021 annual ocean heat content value is even higher than last year's record value." End quote. This finding is surprising because the planet is in the midst of a La Niña, an event that typically leads to a cooler ocean. This peer-reviewed paper in Advances in Atmospheric Sciences was written by Lijiang Cheng and 22 other scholars. In the midst of this La Niña event, overheating of lakes is causing blooms of algae. Freshwater streams and rivers are overheated too, with expectedly dire outcomes for ecosystems. Not only has the all-time hottest ocean on this planet was recorded in 2021, but the ocean was hotter than it's ever been during the last 7 years. In addition to its September 2019 report indicating the irreversibility of climate change, the IPCC concluded that global change is abrupt in its October 8, 2018 report, Global Warming of 1.5 Degrees. Quote, These global-level rates of human-driven change far exceed the rates of change driven by geophysical or biosphere forces that have altered the Earth system trajectory in the past. Even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change, end quote. This IPCC report cites 2 peer-reviewed papers in reaching this conclusion. Bear in mind that the IPCC is conservative. According to the conservative peer-reviewed journal Bioscience, in its March 2019 issue with a paper titled Statistical Language Backs Conservatism in Climate Change Assessments. This paper was authored by Gerardo Perez and 3 other colleagues. I quote from the abstract. Quote, "We found that the tone of the IPCC's probabilistic language is remarkably conservative and emanates from the IPCC recommendations themselves, complexity of climate research, and exposure to politically motivated debates." End quote. Even the conservative IPCC has concluded that climate change is abrupt and irreversible. Individual scientists go further in presenting evidence that nobody wants to accept. Andrew Y. Glickson's October 9th, 2020 book, The Event Horizon, Homo Prometheus and the Climate Catastrophe, contains these lines in the abstract for Chapter 5. Quote, "During the Anthropocene, greenhouse gas forcing has risen by more than 2.0 watts per meter squared, equivalent to more than 2 degrees C above pre-industrial temperatures, which constitutes an abrupt event over a period not much longer than a lifetime." End quote. However, as I have pointed out frequently in this space, 2C never mattered. The IPCC's predecessor, the Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases, pointed out during the final year of its existence that, quote, "Beyond 1 degree C may elicit rapid, unpredictable, and nonlinear responses that could lead to extensive ecosystem damage," end quote. Climate writer and speaker David Spratt indicated that self-reinforcing feedback loops had been triggered at 0.5 C in his October 21st, 2014 presentation, Dangerous Climate Change, Myths and Realities. My own freely available work at GuyMcPherson.com indicates we have triggered many self-reinforcing feedback loops. Any one of these so-called positive feedbacks guarantees the irreversibility of climate change. In other words, climate change is abrupt. In addition, climate change is irreversible. I'm not happy about either outcome. The continued rapid rate of increased global temperature on Earth is expected to increase even faster in the near future. For example, according to K.D. Burke and 5 other scholars in the peer-reviewed Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on December 26, 2018, quote, "Our study suggests that climates like those of the Pliocene will prevail as soon as 2030 in the current era and persist under climate stabilization scenarios," end quote. The global temperature during the mid-Pliocene was about 16.7 C, more than 3 C above the 1750 baseline. This peer-reviewed paper uses the IPCC's representative concentration pathways, thereby ignoring the aerosol masking effect and dozens of self-reinforcing feedback loops. Of course, the rate of global temperature increase could increase further yet. I pointed out a few more routes to rapid planetary heating in my latest peer-reviewed article titled Rapid Loss of Habitat for Homo sapiens. The paper was published in April 2021 by Academia Letters, and it indicates that among the pathways to our rapid extinction is the release of substantial methane from relatively shallow continental shelves or terrestrial surfaces. The January 10, 2022 issue of The New Yorker points out via headline that, quote, "The Great Siberian Thaw," end quote, is underway. Permafrost contains twice as much carbon as Earth's atmosphere. The abrupt release of even a small fraction of that carbon into the atmosphere spells substantial additional heating of Earth in the very near future. If we manage to avoid a rapid burst of methane, then probably the greatest existential threat we face is an ice-free Arctic Ocean and the after effects. Harvard Professor Emeritus of Atmospheric Science James Anderson indicated during an interview with Forbes on January 15, 2018, that the Arctic Ocean will become ice-free in 2023 for the first time in the history of history. That is, for the first time since civilizations arose on Earth. Quote, "The chance that there will be any permanent ice left in the Arctic after 2022 is essentially zero," end quote. Nearly 3.5 years later, coincident with publication of a peer-reviewed paper for which she was lead author in Nature Communications, Professor Jennifer McKinnon from the Scripps Institution and also from the University of California, San Diego, said she expects such an event to occur this year, although she conceded in this CBS News interview on April 23, 2021, that it could be delayed until 2023, consistent with Anderson's earlier comment. Full environmental effects, including a rapid rate of environmental change that would lead to a loss of habitat for humans, would almost certainly occur during the following year, 2024. There is no adapting to extreme weather. That's the compellingly accurate headline at Gizmodo Australia on January 22, 2022. Just as reducing industrial activity hastens rather than delays our extinction, there is no way for us humans to merely adapt to the extreme weather resulting from abrupt, irreversible climate change. Adaptation will not bring back Greenville, California, or Mayfield, Kentucky, destroyed by wildfire and tornado, respectively. Simply put, it's too late for adaptation. It's also too late for mitigation. If it ain't over until the fat lady sings, then it's over. I'd consider our species very lucky to have made it this long. After all, the fat lady was singing heartily in the 1920s when aerosol masking was about the same as it was in the 2010s, and probably the same as it is today. The fat lady was singing loudly a few thousand years ago when humans began growing grains abundantly enough to create cities. I wasn't alive in the 1920s, much less a few thousand years ago. Neither were you. The fat lady could already be heard singing during the cognitive revolution, more than 30,000 years ago. Neither of my two primary conclusions, climate change is abrupt and climate change is irreversible, is sufficient basis for giving up, whatever that means. As a result, I continue my educational efforts by informing as many people as I can about abrupt, irreversible climate change. The analogy drawn from the medical community is obvious. Upon being given a terminal diagnosis, patients deserve to know their likely fate. In addition, I promote the only positive path forward I have found, the mere reflection framework developed by Dr. Ye Tao at Harvard University's Roland Institute. I suspect it is too late for even this comprehensive framework to ward off a near-term ice-free Arctic Ocean, and therefore the loss of all life on Earth. My suspicions aside, I'd rather go down with a fight than without one. My conclusion? It's probably too late for everything except making peace with our lives and the organisms in our lives, human animals included. For me, and for other people influenced by my work, my primary message for these last many years is relevant. No blame, no shame. At the edge of extinction, only love remains.